Closing a wholesale deal is not always as simple as everybody makes it out there to believe. There's a few deals that happen where the sellers get a little bit upset about how much you're making on the deal because it is very hard for sellers to understand the valuable skill that real estate wholesalers possess. And that is that we are technically brokering the deal. And obviously there's different ways around it inside of your state to be able to legally do real estate wholesaling. But it seems like you're not doing very much work, or at least you're not doing any physical labor on the deal. What you're doing is you're doing the marketing to find that seller that's willing to sell their house at a discount. And then on top of that, you're going out there and networking and finding these buyers that are interested in purchasing deals. And so without either side of the spectrum, you're unable to make money on the deal. And obviously us making $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 on a deal, that gets a little bit upsetting for a seller if they're seeing that you're making all this money and you technically didn't do anything, or at least inside of their minds that you're not doing anything, which a lot of times they don't realize the countless amount of hours worth of work that goes into getting this deal all set up and finding the seller. And here's how to avoid a wholesaling disaster and making sure that things don't fall apart with the seller and them coming across finding out how much you're making can get a few people upset. And I've had this happen for me personally where I made a decent amount of money on a deal. I can't remember exactly how much. I just remember the scenario a little bit. And the seller was very upset that I was making this much money and I wasn't the person at the end of the day purchasing the house. So now how can you avoid this? Even if you're a beginner closing your first deal, or you've already closed a few deals and you don't want this to happen, if it hasn't happened already, happen again. So here's kind of like the steps. First of all, you kind of want to lay the foundation. You want them to know that you're making a profit on this deal. And what I usually like to do, you can take this however you want and apply it yourself however you want. But what I usually tell the seller is that I'm looking to make a profit on this deal. Okay. And then after that, usually a lot of times they're asking, what am I doing with this property? And I usually tell them, hey, so I don't know yet, because I usually don't figure out the finer details until after we've kind of signed up the deal. Sometimes I know a little bit in advance before we sign everything up what exactly I'm going to do with the deal. But until I get that exact number on the deal and what's going on, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I don't know if I'm going to try to get tenants inside of there and turn it into a rental property. I don't know if I'm going to try to flip the house with the real estate investor and get the money and then I flip it with them, or if I'm just going to sell the contract over to an end buyer. I don't know exactly what's going on. So what I usually tell them is, I don't know exactly what's going on, Mr. Seller. What usually happens is we either turn it into a rental, we turn it into a fix and flip, or I send it off to someone else that has a little bit more experience or has the ability to be able to flip this house a lot better than I can personally. And so basically I'm telling them that I might wholesale the house, and I'm just kind of putting that all up front. Prefacing a lot of things, it really helps you out in the long run. If you can answer a lot of people's questions up front before these problems occur, then you're going to save yourself a lot larger of a headache, because it kind of like snowballs. The farther down the road, the closer you are to closing a deal, or even after closing a deal, the more upset someone can be if you don't fully answer their questions or give them an answer before it all happens. Now, I'm not telling you, hey, to go up there and say, hey, I'm going to wholesale your house. I'm going to buy it from you at a deep discount and then sell it over to someone else for more. I definitely don't recommend that you tell them that, but kind of just let them know that there might be a possibility that you might sell the contract over to someone else, or give this deal over to somebody else. And I would just leave it at that. And so I would really also plan your closing. So if you're about to make a large assignment fee, like more than, I would say, like $10,000 on this deal, then I really recommend that you go and set up a double closing. So the only problem with the double closing is it's going to cost you a little bit more, because obviously you have two closings. Some title companies do in-house double closings, which is nice because then they usually just take a fee out of what you're making. If you go through private money lenders, they might just take it after it's all said and done and closed. But some of them charge an upfront fee. So I know a lot of you getting started may not have the money to be able to do it all up front. So if you don't have the ability to do a double closing on a deal that you know the seller might get a little bit upset with how much you're making on the deal, I would try your best to try to get it all set up, or the other option is you can just roll the dice on it and just hope they don't get too upset about what's going on, and just try to push it forward so that way you can get everything going. What's nice with the double closing is neither of the parties really know how much you're making on what's going on, because what they're getting is two completely different closing statements, and they're not seeing who the end buyer is or who the beginner seller is unless they go and go into the county's data and look it all up and everything and actually do a lot of research on this deal. But other than that, to the general eye, it's very hard to tell that someone wholesaled this house other than the buyer. Obviously, the buyer is going to know that you're wholesaling the house. I mean, you're telling them that you're assigning the contract over to them, so they know. But it's mainly the seller that we're just trying to get figured out and making sure that they don't want to have this deal just all of a sudden be canceled because they're upset that you're making a lot of money on the deal. So with this, it's kind of just the service that we're providing too. So it's just sometimes we get lucky and have a deal where they're willing to sell it at a discount and we're able to make more money off the deal. And then there's other scenarios, obviously, where we got a little bit finer lines it's more of a tight deal, only a few thousand being made on this deal. So it just really kind of depends. Now, if they are a cool seller, they're a cool person, they understand real estate investing or just understand that you're making a profit on this deal, and they just seem like an all-around relaxed, chill person that's not going to blow things out of proportions, then double closing isn't necessary, or it's not you don't have to do double closing if you feel like they're not going to flip out on this deal. Now, some states require you to do a double closing in order for a deal to be closed, so I'm kind of excluding some of those states. The way to find that out, if you have to do double closing, just go in, talk to your local real estate attorney, or even if you can talk to a local title company, usually they can do it for free and give you a little bit of advice. If you can talk to a title company or a closing attorney, or if you have to, maybe pay a little bit of an hourly fee to talk to a real estate lawyer, real estate attorney on the specifics on what you need to do inside of your state to make sure that everything is legal. So on top of that, I really recommend that you do double closings, and then on top of that, an all cash buyer. So they're paying cash on everything. So that way, when everything's getting moved forward, it's just a lot easier to work with. You don't have to worry about working with them getting it all financed and then the possibility of them having to cancel or anything like that. So I really recommend that you get a pretty decent sized earnest money deposit out of the buyer. So just in case they have to back out of the deal, you still have this earnest money. Make sure that it's non-refundable. So that way, at the end of the day, if you have to, you can give the seller a little bit of the money that you made. Obviously, you can always just keep it and cancel the deal with the seller. Tell them, hey, it's not able to work out. But I usually like to give the seller a little bit of that earnest money just so that way I'm not just wasting their time for getting this deal all tied up and then I'm unable to do anything about it. Obviously, if a buyer ever does cancel and it's a pretty good deal, I really recommend that you go out and try to get the contract extended for a little bit more time if you had a few people interested, or just cancel the contract and get it for a lower price a little bit later so that way it's able to work out. Because if a cash buyer cancels, there's usually two different reasonings behind it. It's because they are unable to perform on their end, or the worst, I guess this happens to a lot of rookies or beginners, is you don't get the deal under contract for low enough. And if that's the problem, then obviously there's nothing you can do with the current circumstances, so you'll need to cancel the contract, and hopefully you can renegotiate the deal and get it for a lower price, and just be completely transparent with them, with the seller, and say, hey, I'm the numbers were unable to work. I was working with some of my business partners and we're unable to make it work at this price, and just try to get it a little bit lower, kind of just explain to them what's going on and why you were unable to perform on the closing. So with all this, real estate wholesaling, it is a little bit more complicated than a lot of people put it out there to be. But at the same time, it's just the simple principles of making wholesaling work. And then on top of that, just rolling with the punches as they come. This isn't really anything to be afraid of, because obviously if this problem, if you haven't ran into this yet, then there's really nothing to worry about. And the only way to get to this problem, or to where the seller's upset about how much you're making, is by taking action and going out there and signing up deals. And by the time you get this close to closing a deal, that means you're pretty close to making money off of a deal anyways. And if you've gotten this close, you can go out there and get this close again at the end of the day if you do end up losing the deal. You just want to be very transparent, and being able to provide the seller with enough information, kind of letting them know that everything is getting taken care of, but at the same time kind of understanding the boundaries of, will this seller take it too far, or is this seller a little bit more of a chill person that's more understanding and kind of understands at the end of the day, you got to make money for what you're doing. And not always in real estate investing are people signing up deals and purchasing them themselves. There's obviously those few deals that people come across where they're just unable to make it work. So anyways, hopefully I answered a few of your guys' questions, and maybe some of you are in this situation currently. If you've ever ran into one of these circumstances before, drop it down in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your story, see if you guys had a win on it, or if you just lost out entirely. We can all learn from it. So anyways, if you haven't already, join the gang, join the gang, hit the subscribe button down below. And like always, I'll see you all tomorrow. Peace.